Hi guys, today's video is all about reacting mass calculations. So this is about if you know how much of something that you have, how much of the product you're going to make from that. Please enjoy. Let's crack on with an example. Carbon burning in oxygen to make CO2. This equation is already balanced. Now my question today is if I've got 12 grams of carbon, what mass of CO2 am I going to make? Now from the equation, we know that if you've got one atom of carbon, that will react with one molecule of oxygen to make one molecule of CO2, because all of them have got ones in front of them in the equation. Now unfortunately, we know that CO2 weighs a lot more than a carbon does. So if you were thinking that you could say, oh, I've got 12 grams of carbon, so therefore I'll have 12 grams of CO2, it's not quite right because the CO2 is so much heavier than the carbon. So I need to take into consideration how much each one of these weighs. Let's look at how we work this through. So if you've got your equation at the top, which you always should, you can draw a grid underneath it which will help you to organise your working and where all the numbers have come from. So if you've got your mass, then your molar mass and then your moles, this will help you to organise your work. So let's look at what we've got already. I know the mass of carbon is 12 grams, so let's put that in. I also know that the thing I'm aiming for is the mass of carbon dioxide, so I'm going to put a little box around that to show that's what I'm aiming for. From the equation, I also know something called the mole ratio. So before I said that if I had one atom of carbon, it would make one molecule of CO2. But in fact, the number of atoms relates to the number of moles. So we can say that if I've got 1 mole of CO2, then I've also got 1 mole of O2 and 1 mole of carbon. So what we're going to do is we're going to use that ratio to work out how much carbon dioxide I would make. The first thing you need to do is to work out how many moles of carbon you actually have. So what we're going to use is the mass, which is moles equals mass divided by molar mass. So you end up with mass divided by molar mass. Hold up. So the molar mass is that thing that came from the periodic table in the last video. The molar mass of carbon is 12. So if I do 12 divided by 12, that will give me 1. So 1 mole of carbon. I said before that if I had 1 mole of carbon, that meant that I also had 1 mole of CO2. So we can transfer that number across. If we work out the molar mass of carbon on the periodic table, that's 12 plus 16 plus 16 gives you 44. The rearrangement of that first equation is your mass equals molar mass times the moles. So that in total will be 1 times 44 to give you 44 grams of carbon dioxide to end with. Let me go through one more example with you, and then I'd like you to try the last one on your own before you look at the answers. So this is the question. What mass of magnesium oxide will be made from 12 grams of magnesium? So what we need to do first is we need to write out the equation. We haven't been given it this time. So you've got magnesium plus oxygen, so 2, gives you MgO, magnesium oxide. So if I balance that, I've got 2 magnesiums and 2 MgOs. So that means that my mole ratio in this case is now 2 to 1 to 2. Just looking at the big numbers in front of each of my species. So let's make the grid below just the same as we did before and chuck in the stuff that we know about. So I know that I've got 12 grams of magnesium, so I'm going to add the 12 in, and I'm aiming for the mass of magnesium oxide. So the first thing that we need to do is work out exactly how many moles of magnesium I've actually got. So the molar mass of magnesium on your periodic table you'll find is 24. So moles equals mass divided by molar mass. So 12 divided by 24 gives you 0.5. So if I had 2 moles of magnesium, using the numbers at the top, then I would make 2 moles of magnesium oxide. I don't. I've got 0.5 moles. But because the ratio is the same, I know that that must mean I've got 0.5 moles of my magnesium oxide as well. You can then work out your relative formula mass or your molar mass of your magnesium oxide. It's just 24 plus 16, giving you 40 in total. So then your mass equals molar mass times moles, giving you 20 grams in total. So we would make 20 grams of magnesium oxide from 12 grams of magnesium. Right, this is the last example of the video. I would like you to have a go at this one on your own to see if you can get the same answer as I'm going to get in a minute. Please pause it, see if you can work it out. I'll give you the equation so you don't need to do that, but do make sure it's balanced before you start. So, should we have a look at the answers, see how we go? So let's balance the equation first. So I need 2 NaOHs and 2 H2Os to balance this all out. I currently know that I've got 5 grams of the sodium sulfate, and I'm aiming to find out the mass of the NaOH. All good so far. So this goes the other way to the previous examples, but it works in exactly the same way. It doesn't matter because the ratios are all the same. So if I've got 5 grams of sodium sulfate, I know that I can work out the moles of sodium sulfate. So sodium sulfate has a molar mass of 142. Hopefully you've managed to work that out using your periodic table. So if I do 5 divided by 142, I get 0.035 moles of sodium sulfate. Now I need to use the mole ratios to work out how much sodium hydroxide I'm going to have. Oh, I've forgotten to put them at the top. So let's add those in. So I've got 2 to 1 to 1 to 2 is my mole ratio in this equation. So what that means is if I had 1 sodium sulfate, I would make 2 NaOHs. But in reality, I've got 0.035 moles of sodium sulfate. So I'm going to need to times that number by 2 to get the number of moles of NaOH. So that means my moles of NaOH is 0.07 moles. The MR, the molar mass of NaOH, is 40. And so if we times those two numbers together, you get the mass, which is 2.8 grams of NaOH. Hopefully you got the right answer there. So that's all for this video. I'm hoping that you found it useful. Please do lots more examples. Doing lots of these will make you feel way more confident. Just make sure to get that grid system set up first so you don't lose any of the numbers.